Welcome, everyone, to the Antisocial Podcast. My name is Andy Dowling, and before we kick into this week's episode, it's time to show a bit of gratitude. Each and every week, if you're new to this podcast, I thank somebody that supports me or supports like either of the podcasts, whether it be Self-Starter or Antisocial. It could be the band Lord, and it can be arranged in different ways. It could be a bit of social media love, sharing things around. It could be buying some merchandise. So I've got merchandise through the andysocial.net website, t-shirts, USB passes, patches. I've got, we've got merchandise through the Lord website, lord.net.au. You can leave reviews online. You could be suggesting me guests for upcoming podcast episodes, messages of encouragement, anything. It could be small or it could be big. It all adds up and it means a hell of a lot to me and keeps me fueled and motivated. And I really, really appreciate the support that you guys continuously give me because at times this is a really challenging thing or a bunch of things that I've taken on. And when I get these little bits of feedback from people, it's a little bit of a spark and it keeps me fueled. So thank you so much for all the support. However, I only pick one person each week because, we've got plenty of time. We'll get there eventually. But this week's shout out is for Susie Turner. Now, we're going international, folks. It's been a little while since we've done an international shout out, but Susie Turner is from Cardiff in Wales, in the UK. And Susie's sent me through a beer shout. So if you don't know what a beer shout is, you can donate money through the PayPal button on my andysocial.net page. And I call it shouting me a beer because if you guys shout me money for a beer, then that's less of my own money that I have to spend on beer, which then means that I've got more money of my own to reinvest back into the podcast. Do you like that logic? It's a bit of a roundabout way of supporting the podcast, but thank you so much. And Susie, very generous. I really, really appreciate it. It goes a hell of a long way. It does more or less come back into the podcast and keep everything fueled and everything moving. There's a lot of costs that come into this podcast each and every week and each and every month. And I'm continuously trying to extend and push this out and do a lot more traveling with this podcast as well. So I've got a lot of great plans and plenty of time to tick all these things off the list, but we've got to start somewhere, and these little shouts along the way mean a hell of a lot to me. So, Susie, shoot me a message. I'm going to send you out some cool things in the post as well. I've got a bunch of awesome bits of music and little giveaways and little fun little things that people have donated, great musicians and people that have been part of the podcast in the past as well. And I'm going to send some things out to you because we all love getting something in the mail. So thank you so much. You may know already, but just in case you didn't, I've got to cover all bases. I play bass, speaking of which, in the Australian metal band Lord. And if you love a bit of heavy metal, or even if you don't, and you're just curious and want a sticky beak, go to lord.net.au. We've got a fantastic website that Tim has knocked up together, and there is all sorts of content on there. There's streaming music, there's videos, our entire back catalogue, there's merchandise. It's one of the easiest, and I think it's quite a fun platform to discover our music and just get a taste of what we're all about. So go to lord.net.au, really, really cool website, lots of great links and resources and historical information there, and please tell me what you think of it as well. In addition to playing in a heavy metal band, I also host the Self-Starter podcast, which is all about small business, self-employment, and freelancing. So depending on where you are in your journey in life, it could be just starting your own business, or you've got your own small business that you're running. You could be a freelancer. You could be just earning a little bit of pocket money on the side, or you're working a job that you absolutely hate and you want to get the hell out of. Go to selfstarter.com.au, check out the fortnightly episodes that come out, check out the blog. There's heaps of resources. Hopefully it's up your alley, and I reckon you'll get something out of it if any of those things tick a box for you. Search for Self-Starter in the podcast player that you're listening through right now. If you can't find it, please tell me, because I'm trying to get it everywhere. I'm slowly getting there. But thank you so much for the support for both Lord and Self-Starter. It means a hell of a lot. Lord.net.au, selfstarter.com.au. Thank you very much, folks. This week's episode is with Emma Jane Holmes. Emma, this is a different one for you guys. Emma is a death care professional. She works in a funeral home, and she is a writer. She's got a book coming out next year, and she's got her own blog called Heels and Hearses. Now, you guys know that I've had a few odd topics and guests on in the past, and Emma is certainly a left field guest. This is a really, really cool chat. And I forgot to tell Emma as well when we were having a conversation and afterwards how I actually found her. I was actually looking up morticians for the Antisocial podcast because I thought that'd be such a cool guest to have on the show. It's a profession that people don't like freely talk about in day-to-day life. It's something that's probably got a little bit of a taboo associated with it because it's just, it's a bit creepy and dark and morbid. So I thought that'd be really cool. So I typed in something silly like Australian mortician or morticians into Google, and up pops these news articles about Emma. And I just thought, oh, wow, this is different. This is next level. And so I reached out to Emma, and now we've got this great conversation that you're about to hear. But Emma's got this blog called Heels and Hearses, where she's blended her worlds together, the things that she does outside of work, the things that, her personality and who she is, with her work as a death care professional in the funeral industry. And it's interesting. It's so fascinating. And I think a big thing behind what she's doing, she's trying to dispel a lot of the myths around what a funeral home is and what the funeral industry is all about. And she brings so much light onto the subject, and I think she tries to change the perceptions that we have and the things that we've always sort of seen death to be. And she's got a unique way of writing and presenting it, and no doubt it's going to ruffle a few feathers out there, but I think it's just really, really cool. And when you hear Emma talk about this, you can hear the passion, you can hear how much she cares about what she does. She's so passionate about her job, like it's borderline, like at times I'm like, oh, geez, like you're really into this. Like this is full on. But when she explains it, it makes sense. And one of the things that was really cool that I took out of this was she spoke about what she does is about serving the living. When they're having a funeral, the deceased is only a small part of what they do. They are there to support the living, the people that are there to attend the funeral. And there's just so much to her job. And there's some stuff here that's a little bit, might make your skin crawl a little bit, but it's cool. It's fascinating. And I think you guys are going to get a lot out of this. So if you want to learn more about Emma, you can go to heelsandhearses.com. You can search for it on Facebook as well. That's her blog. She does have a book coming out next year, which she hasn't announced anything for yet, but we talk about a little bit at the end of this episode. So stay tuned, and I'll update everybody in time when that's all announced. And as always, I'm going to dump a whole bunch of stuff in the show notes over at andysocial.net. But this is such a cool chat. Emma is such a cool person. I really enjoyed speaking. There's so many great things in this chat, and I think you're all going to get something out of this because, as we mentioned in this conversation, we're all going to die sometime, and we're all going to know somebody that dies as well. So let's start talking about it a lot more. Let's get more prepared, and let's embrace this normal part of life. So enough of me. Please enjoy this really, really cool chat with Emma Jane Holmes. Emma, I have to ask you straight away, because we were meant to do this the other night, and you sent me a message in the afternoon just saying, look, something urgent's come in. We've received a call from the police. I'm on call, and can we move it? Can you please tell me what happened?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I'm currently working for a funeral home that has been granted the police contract. Not all funeral homes have this. Most funeral homes will just take people into their care from hospitals or nursing homes. There's only a handful of funeral homes that have the government or the police contract, and I'm so blessed to be able to work for one of those. A police call out can be anything from an accident to just a suspicious death. Maybe they hadn't been to the doctor recently. That particular evening that we spoke, it did end up just being a regular removal. At the time, the death seemed suspicious because he was in bed and he'd had a few drinks. But when the doctor arrived, it turned out it was a heart attack that took him, but we still had to do the process as if it was a suspicious death. And sometimes that can take quite a few hours, the waiting around, waiting for the police officers to do their work, waiting for the doctor to show up. So sometimes it's a real grueling event.
So you mentioned before about how fortunate you feel to be able to get that sort of contract. What is it that's so attractive about being able to, get a contract like that? And why doesn't most funeral homes not get the opportunity to sort of be linked in with the police and the government like that?
Okay, so I think for me, I find it interesting because I think there's a part of me that always wanted to be in forensics. Everybody loves, everyone's got to admit, they love watching the true crime documentaries, and everyone loves a little bit of, a bit of horror movie stuff. So when you're working for a funeral home that doesn't have the contract, day in, day out, doing your regular work, it's just like any job. Like, you put your heart in it, you love it so much, and we treat each and every case with so much respect. But after a while, when you visit the forensic science unit, for example, and you see what happens, you kind of wish you could see that side of things.
Mm.
So, and I always have I dreamt of having that opportunity for so many years. So that's why I feel blessed, because I've wanted to do it for so long. The reason not all funeral homes can do it is there's just not enough work.
Yeah.
So what happens is the police contract will go up for grabs, and a funeral home will put forward why they should have it. I believe so. This is what happens in the big time of
Yep.
the big managers do that. And yeah, for a certain amount of time, you will have that contract. So the second someone passes away due to a serious accident or injury or suicide, even murder, we will take the body from the scene of the crime and take it to the coroner. So it's just a completely different side to the work that I've always been really fascinated in. So I find it really interesting. Some people, I've spoken to funeral directors that could not think of anything worse.
Mm.
So it's really, some people like different things in the industry. When I was working for a funeral home that didn't have the contract, whenever we were told we were going to the forensic science unit, everyone would just give me the paperwork and say, "Oh, Emma will do it," because I think I have a strong stomach as well. So I might look like a bit of a little blonde pansy, but I actually really love that stuff.
Well, I was going to say, and you mentioned it before, I think most people really have a fascination with, watching the crime shows, watching even on like the true crime channels where you're watching the documentaries about all these murders that have happened over the years, and it's so intriguing because you want to learn about something that I guess in everyday life you don't have a lot of exposure to. It's the unknown. It's something that's a little bit scary, and something that's
Yeah.
it's edgy, and there's all these feelings that you get when you're watching it. And I guess at a baseline, it's entertaining as well. But for you, it's like it's next level. I mean, you're actually physically there. It's a reality for you, where I think a lot of people have got that disconnect where it becomes something as a light form of entertainment, where it's a little bit of curiosity, but that's about it. But for you, it's something much more than that. And I guess where I'm going with this is, can you give me a quick rundown, or however long you want, of how on earth you came up or found the interest in working in the funeral industry? It's absolutely fascinating that
Yeah.
that you've got so much passion about it.
Thank you. Well, just quickly with the police contract, I'll just add, as much as it's interesting to go to the scene of a crime and be there and watch the police do their work, it's also an honor to be there to help the family, because there's many times where they're a family just absolute shock. A lot of the time they're not there, obviously. I haven't done too many police call outs yet, but it's such an honor to be there and help them in their time of need in such a horrific time. But to your question about how did I become interested in it, it's a question that I think every funeral director has troubles answering, because there's never that definite moment that you think, oh, I want to work in a mortuary, or I would love to work in a casket showroom. It's just never a conscious thought. It's almost like we were born to do it. Every funeral director will tell you that there's just no other job I've ever wanted to do. And that was really the case with me as well. Ever since I was just a little kid, it was just something that fascinated me, because there was a funeral home near the supermarket, actually, and Mum would go shopping, and this big red building fascinated me, and Mum told me it was a funeral home, and I was just curious about why the door was closed, and I wanted to know what happened behind those big doors. And then obviously my nan would pass away, or my dog would pass away, and I wanted to know, how can you care? Like, there's doctors and there's nurses. We all have people looking after us when we're alive. I wanted to be one of those people that looked after people once they passed away. So it was just something I always wanted to do. It's really hard to describe, to be honest, but a lot of funeral directors will tell you that. It's just something it's like a calling, I guess.
I mean, it's something that I guess well, look, it actually happens to every single person. We all get
Yeah.
exposed to death, and eventually we are the ones involved in it. And but
Yeah.
it's I think, stereotypically, and I guess over centuries or just human evolution, we've or in a lot of cultures, not all cultures, but a lot of cultures, especially in the Western world, put death in a category of negativity,
Hmm.
something that to be feared of.
Absolutely. Death defying. I always say it's death.
Yeah,
The
that's right.
Western world, they're afraid. They have a massive fear of death, and it's like if they talk about it too much, it's going to curse them and it's going to happen to them, or is taboo. It is a very sensitive subject. Even now, I do find myself getting some negative feedback. Of course, some people are very afraid of it, and I believe the more I'm in the funeral industry, it actually reminds me of when I was a kid, and I did actually have a fear of it. I lived on a farm, and I remember falling asleep one night, and there was a bushfire, um, and we weren't in danger of being affected, but I remember being in bed and I could smell it, I could hear it, and I was so afraid. I was so petrified. I couldn't sleep. And I remember just thinking, oh my goodness, like, what if I die tonight? I'm going to lose my whole family. But I forgot that until I became a funeral director. So it's almost like I was always so fearful of death, just like we all are. And it's like I just needed to overcome that fear. And becoming a funeral director has really helped me overcome that fear, embrace it, and live my life to the fullest, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one thing that while we all fear it, and I think in a lot of our culture, we put a negative spin on it, and we try and avoid it in conversation or refer to it unless it's in horrible circumstances. But I
Yeah.
mean, what we all want, regardless of that, is for us or our loved ones, anybody impacted, to be taken care of when it happens. And it's not something that's discussed. It's something that everyone hopes and wishes for, and they cross their fingers more or less because no one's willing to talk about it. And
Yeah.
and for you, I mean, I think you wrote it on your blog in your about section, and you call yourself a death care professional, and I love that. I don't know if that is that a technical term, or have you
Uh,
sort of spun that one, because I think it's absolutely fantastic, because it's
oh,
something
thank
that's missing.
you.
It's missing in our society. I think we do praise the doctors and people that work in all of our services to look after us, but we're not always highlighting the people that are coming in those final moments to take care of our loved ones and ourselves.
Absolutely, and thank you. That's a very kind comment, and it is something we call ourselves. We call ourselves death care professionals. To me, it's just a little bit less confronting than mortician or undertaker or funeral director.
Mm.
We are all of those terms here in Australia. In America, if you're a mortician, you're a mortician. You're an embalmer. You actually have your set roles. But here in Australia, you wear all the hats. So I just find that death care professional, it kind of covers everything that we do. It's a little bit less confronting
Yeah.
than mortician or undertaker. When you say that, people just automatically think of, the Addams Family or coffins and Dracula, that kind of thing. So I just feel like it's just, we are professionals. People forget we exist because when someone passes away in a hospital, we come in the side door, the back door at the hospital to the mortuary. Someone passes away at home, we come in a van. It's all very hush hush, it's all very secret. So a lot of people forget that we exist and we are professionals, and we share the roads with you every single day. We share the supermarket line with you every single day, but people don't realize that, yeah, there are people that do this job, and we are professionals, and we do take our job very seriously, just the way a doctor or any profession. Yeah.
I mean, I had a personal experience. I guess most recently was probably about a year and a half ago to 2 years ago. My grandfather had passed away, and elderly. He had a great innings,
Yeah.
and probably no better way for him to pass on. And I hadn't been to a funeral in a long, long, long time. And so I went up to Queensland with my family and met up with everybody and went to my grandfather's funeral. And I think it was the first time that I've ever sort of been really sort of attentive and aware of what was going on around me. And it was a very small affair, but the people that worked for the funeral funeral home, the way that they handled it, the way that they talked to everybody, the way that they were just very aware of everybody in the room, not just, the person that was lying there.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
it was just absolutely incredible. And I thought it really takes a certain type of person to be able to do this. And it's, I think for a lot of people in the general public, you go, well, it's probably somebody that's got a little bit of who's a little bit creepy and a little bit loopy for them to have the stomach to be able to handle that. And someone who's a little bit, fixated on the grim sides of life. But
yeah,
I think it's really
absolutely.
it's a personal thing. It's a human connection. It's somebody that's able to talk to people and connect on a number of different levels.
I'm really sorry to hear about your grandfather, firstly. And it's so lovely that you had such a lovely, intimate ceremony, a farewell for him. And it's so lovely that you think of it that way. That you said he had great innings and things. So that's really you've progressed. You're doing better than a lot of people, because a lot of people, I know of a person who even admitted to me once, when their friend lost their nan or somebody in their family that was very dear to them, when they saw them in the street, they literally purposely went out of their way to avoid them because they didn't know how to approach that
Mm.
person. So I don't know what to say when someone, so you're doing a lot better than a lot of people by saying, he had good innings and it was a lovely ceremony. So that's great to hear. And it's really lovely that you thought that of the funeral directors. And the thing is, being a funeral director, the deceased is actually the smallest part of what we do. Of course, it's important we take care of them like they're our own family, but it's actually serving the living. That's what we do. So it's actually being there for the people left behind. It's helping you in that church or chapel or the cemetery, wherever you're holding your farewell. Our job is to make sure that you're okay. We're going to be there for you because you are just beside yourself. You're heartbroken, your mind is clouded, you're not thinking straight. So that's our job, to look after you. And we will also take care of Pop or Nan or whoever it is that has passed away. But our main priority is making sure that you're okay. And a lot of people don't realize that. They think that we're just in the industry because we love, working with dead bodies and we love poking body parts. I don't know what people think, but that's actually, it's so far from the truth. It's not funny. And we're there to help people. We care about people. So you say that it takes a very special person. I think everybody could do it. Everybody that has a heart could do it. You just need to, yeah, you need to be strong, but you need to be a very caring person, because your job day in, day out is to look after people who are, in this horrible time in their lives.
It's probably not the right term, but it's the first thing that came to my head. Do you think that after a while you become a little bit desensitized to, I guess, probably the in your face aspect of the role? And I don't mean desensitized in the sense that you don't have sensitivity to what you do, but just being able to, as you said, you've got to be strong when you're doing a type of job like this. And do you think that over time, and I guess through repetition, through different scenarios, or just being exposed to something that most people will never be exposed to in that sort of way, and a lot of people would be absolutely fearful of being in your shoes and experiencing even a slight percentage of what you do. Do you
Absolutely.
believe that over time that's probably been something that you developed a little bit of a not disconnect, I'm trying to think of a better word, but
No,
if you know
no,
what I
I
mean?
understand what you're saying. You desensitize. Look, I will admit, on my very first day that I ever worked in a funeral home, I nearly passed out. Well, I was having an induction, an orientation day, and they took us through, and I had no idea that the room we were about to walk into was the actual mortuary, and I hadn't seen a deceased person ever since my nan's funeral when I was a child, and I had family all around and it was very intimate. It was your nan. But to walk into a mortuary as a young woman and just see strangers in their coffins, it was very confronting for me. And I made sure I was never alone when I was downstairs. I always made sure if I had to take paperwork downstairs, I always made sure there was someone around. I was petrified for the first 6 months of my career. And just yesterday at work, I was doing some woodwork on my own with a fridge full of the deceased right next to me, and I completely, I'm at peace and I'm doing my job and I'm filling out the paperwork and it doesn't scare me at all. So you definitely get used to it. You definitely become more peaceful with your job, because it's very confronting at first. You never, personally, I never get desensitized to death. Like it still frightens me sometimes. If I ever think about it and think, oh my goodness, this is going to be me one day, I freak out a little bit. But as far as the actual body and the cases, there is almost like a switch that you have to turn off, otherwise you wouldn't be able to do your job. Some cases I've walked into, you take a moment, you take a deep breath, you assess the situation, and you just have to get on with it, otherwise you wouldn't be able to. And yeah, there's no other way to do it than just be strong and just focus on the family that are still alive. And it's like, okay, my job is to help them, and it's not to focus on this mess in front of me. That's basically, and occasionally at the end of the day, you'll think to yourself, oh my goodness, did I really do that today? But I'm sure there's people who have been in the industry for, say, 30 years. I know lots of funeral directors who are still in the funeral home at 60, 70 years old. They'll be there until they, pun intended, they'll die. And I'm sure they're a lot more desensitized to someone who's only been in the industry a few years, like myself.
I think one thing that I've noticed with a lot of people, and quite a few people that have been on this podcast over the last few years, people that work in very intense situations, very intense surroundings, and that could mean a whole bunch of different things. It could be in emergency services, it could be out there in an area where there's a lot of things that could go wrong, or it could just be some a set of circumstances where it's very extreme, that could be very very distracting, and you need a real high level of focus. And I mean, what you mentioned there about, you have to be able to, whatever it might be, but you have to try and switch off to a degree of a certain aspect to be able to stay focused and get on with what you're doing. And I think that's a quality that not everybody has. Or I think everybody has got it, but I think many people don't actually ever have themselves in a situation where they need to practice that. And so when we do discover people out there that are doing these amazing things, and they're able to freely switch on, switch off in these really intense situations, well, perceived to be very intense situations, it's absolutely amazing to be able to think how on earth I could never see myself doing that, because it's just so extreme from the outside.
That is so lovely of you to say, and every funeral director in the world right now would want to give you a hug, because that is absolutely, it really is. It's really so nice to hear someone say that, because quite often you, even at funerals, not all the time, but sometimes you'll get family that are quite afraid of you because you're in your big black suit and the big black car, and they don't realize that we actually we care about you. We really want to be there for you. But going back to the cases that are confronting, it's really funny that you say it must be hard to focus sometimes, because as an everyday person in everyday life, I'm a creative, so I find it really hard to focus. I constantly have things going on in my head. I'll go grocery shopping and I'll think of a plot for a story, or I have to get back to my computer to write a blog post. I find it incredibly hard to focus. And something happens when I step into that funeral home, because I don't think of anything but work. I could have just had a cut, like I've run into the back of someone one morning because I was half asleep being on call all night, and I know I have to go back to that situation after work. But the second I walk into work, that doesn't matter anymore, because I'm alive, and that's what keeps me focused. It's like, okay, Emma Jane, you're still alive. You're still able to pay your bills. You're still able to do all of these things. So today your focus is this person who's passed away. This person that's in your care right now was alive last night. Now they're not, and that could be you. So that's what I kind of use. That's my go-to to focus. Because the second I walk back out of that funeral home, I mean, I forget to turn my lights off. I lose my keys. Like, I don't know what happens. I just turn back into that forgetful Emma. But the second I walk into work, something switches and I turn into a death care professional. And it's just something that every funeral director can do. Even in the lunchroom, like, you hear the guys banter, telling funny stories and riddles, ghost stories, all of this cool, interesting stuff. But the second they get in their suit and they're at a cemetery serving a family, it's just so amazing to watch them transform from joker to professional funeral director. It really is so amazing. So we're very blessed. We're very blessed.
It's it's incredible to hear you articulate it like that, because there's so much self-awareness that I think you do need to be able to make those distinctions, and maybe it's just, you know, it becomes natural for you all. As you said, I think for people that work in that type of industry, it's a bit of a calling, and it's something that you naturally just fall into. But I think just to have that self-awareness of being able to understand, you know, a time and a place for everything, and understanding when to, I guess, you know, for a lack of a better term, let your hair down, versus being professional and being very attentive to the people that are around you. And as you said before, your focus is on the living. You know, you're there to serve the living, more so than the deceased. The deceased is a smaller aspect of the bigger picture of what you're doing. So I mean, that takes a lot of self-awareness to understand where you stand in this what could be a very confusing time for a lot of people that are coming in to utilize your services.
Absolutely. And it's you've never seen so much honesty at a funeral. There's so many times where at a funeral, you know, you watch the family walk out and they're still in shock and the curtains close, or you're lowering the person into their grave, and people's faces are in shock, and it's because they're faced with their own mortality, that one day that will be you. And it saddens me sometimes that people cannot wait to get away from that. I mean, of course it's natural. Oh my goodness, this is too morbid, this is depressing, I need to get back to work, I need to get back to the traffic jam. People crave that normality and to be away from that. But I just kind of wish everyone could just remember every single day that they wake up that life is to be lived. It's to be having fun, and one day that will be you. And that's why I did write the blog, and and going back to the whole let your hair down, we do let our hair down too, but we just also know why we're here, and that's, you know, that's to live your life.
When you said earlier about you know, almost fainting when you first started the job and doing induction, and just going, oh geez, like I'm really getting thrown in the deep end here, walking straight into this room and not realizing over those first few months, where you mentioned those first 6 months, it took you some time to sort of get used to everything and feel comfortable in this, I guess, this completely different environment. Were there times in those first 6 months where you thought, oh, maybe I haven't made the right decision. Maybe I need to sort of look at something that's a little bit less extreme, something that's a little bit more boring and run of the mill. Was there any moments like that, or did you sort of have, you know, just that tunnel vision that, no, this is something I really want to work at and get better at?
No, so actually that's the fantastic question, because I definitely did feel that. The funeral home spooked me each and every day I went to work. I'm very blessed to have got my very first job with a very large company. So the funeral home I worked for was massive. It had lots of long, winding corridors, and it had multiple viewing rooms. And each time I walked down the corridor, I would sneak past all the viewing rooms with one eye open, because I had no idea would there be a open casket just sitting there. So I was quite afraid. I had done a diploma in beauty therapy, thinking that's what I would need to do to be a mortician, to do the makeup and the hair and things. So I actually did leave the industry and went and got a job in a beauty salon. And I lasted about 3 months, and I was back in the funeral home. I just missed it. I just missed it so much. And that was when I never left again. So I definitely did leave to try and get, you know, the normal job. But it wasn't for me. I had to go back to the funeral home.
Well, for some people, they probably thought, oh, wow, what does that tell you about the beauty industry if you had to escape that and go back to the funeral home? It's incredible.
Yes. Yeah, no, I had a lot more fun at the funeral home. And, you know, a lot of people in the beauty salon just took things so seriously. And some days I wanted to say, look, it's just a massage, or it's just a facial, stop stressing about it. So I found at the funeral home, people were actually a lot less serious, because they knew, you know, they're faced with death every single day, so they make light of it. Whereas at the beauty salon, it was just so serious every day. So you'd think it'd be the other way around. You would think that, you know, everybody at the funeral home would be all serious and grim, but I actually found it was more relentless at the beauty salon.
I mean, talking about talking about sort of, I guess, what you thought you needed to do and going out there and getting those skills because you thought that was what you needed to work in a funeral home. I think anybody that's listening to this podcast would kick me if I didn't ask. I have to get into some of the nitty gritty here.
Absolutely.
Can you explain to me some of the things that you do on a day-to-day basis working in a funeral home? Because I think, yes, we've talked about taking care of the living and serving them and making sure that they're okay when they go through this process and this event. But yeah, what are some of these other things that you do?
Okay, so there's so much that goes on behind the scenes. There really is, right down to, putting tire shine on the hearse wheels. And that's pretty much the first thing we do when we get in. So we'll clean the hearses, make sure they look great for the day. We will go to the mortuary. There is a register. So anybody that came in overnight, we have to go through, cross-check paperwork, make sure that that's all correct. We will go in and check the deceased for any valuables, rings, jewelry, clothing. The mortician, depending on what funeral, I've worked for a few funeral homes, the process is always different. But if you're working for a big company, the mortician needs to come over and make sure that you've done all your job correctly. Then they'll take the deceased into the mortuary. Depending on the way how the person passed away will depend on what happens. So let's just assume we're talking about a lady who's passed away at a nursing home. After we've done all that, we will place her in her coffin. We'll do all the paperwork again. There's so much paperwork. There's more paperwork at a funeral home than coffins. And then we'll put them into the back of the hearse and off we go. So the mornings are very rushed. The mornings are hectic. The truck is bringing in coffins. We have to put handles on the coffins. The florists are bringing in flowers. So there are some mornings you forget you're a funeral director. Like, you forget that you're actually got a dead person close to you because there's just so much other stuff going on. It's not until you get to the church and you see the grieving family that you remember, okay, this is a funeral here. This isn't just a wedding or a birthday party. This is a funeral. And on goes the funeral director face and our professionalism, and our day starts there. When we get back to base, it's pretty much all over again. The transfer is my favourite role. The transfer is taking the deceased from place of death into our care. That could be a home, a nursing home, scene of a crime like we spoke about earlier. That's my favourite role, obviously because I really love that side of things, as we spoke earlier. But you get to see people at their most honest. They're crying. They'll show you photos of the deceased. They hug you. They come up to you and they're thanking you. We'll put the deceased into a comfortable capsule and we'll put them into our stretcher and strap them in, and we'll take them back to base. That's to me is when I feel like I'm a proper funeral director. I'm touching the person because I'm checking their fingers for rings. I'm looking in their ears for earrings. I'm checking their mouth for dentures. I'm checking their belly button for a belly. Like, you're checking that deceased from top to bottom to make sure you don't miss anything. And that's when I really feel like I'm in the guts of what I do. And that's my favourite role. And we're on the road doing that all day, every day, and all night. So there's so many things, and people don't realise that there's just so much that we do. We don't just jump in a hearse and show up with our pretty coffin. There's actually a lot that we do.
Well, no wonder you can switch on and switch off, because you're so busy all the time. You don't really have time to sort of absorb the severity of the situation for the family or the deceased or anything like that, because you've got so much work that you have to do. So you're on the go all the time. So it probably makes it a little bit easier to be able to sort of turn off at times.
Yes, and I can't remember the last time I had a lunch break, but some days you do at the end of the day, sit in your car, in the car park, take a deep breath and go, oh my goodness, what a day. You don't even remember what you did that day. So you're absolutely right. A lot of the time we're just too busy to even stop and think.
When you're transferring the deceased, and you use the scenario of somebody who's passed away in a nursing home, but you've mentioned that there's a whole range of different scenarios of ways that people can die and where you transfer from. Once they're, depending on, I guess, the situation itself, what are the sort of things that you have to do or your team has to do when the deceased arrives back at the funeral home? And as far as, especially if it's open casket, I mean, those are the things that always, I've been to a couple over the years and many, many, many years ago. And I'm sure, the skills and the expertise and everything continues to get better and better, but it's a very confronting thing, and I would assume that there's quite a bit of work and involvement that is needed at times, depending on the individual, to make sure that they're presentable, for lack of a better word.
Yes, absolutely. The makeup and hair takes 3 minutes. That is the last thing we do. There is so many things that we do to make sure that they look amazing. And that's right down to bathing them in really warm water, for example, massaging the hands, just pulling their fingers back ever so gently and slightly, just to relieve that little bit of rigor mortis. Rubbing a little bit of shaving cream into their skin. This is where the beauty therapist comes in, but give them a little bit of a massage in the face area, because the skin tightens and the body does a lot of interesting things after you take your final breath. So there's a lot of little things that we do to make sure that they look great. Shaving, doing their hair perfectly, making sure that, we've done a lovely mouth suture, or have we used an expression former perhaps, which is a nice little curved piece of plastic which can enhance the facial features. There's so many little things that we do to ensure that they look amazing. It would take forever to explain it, but it really just comes down to caring about them and taking that extra effort to make sure they look lovely. If it has been something that you're talking about, like an accident or a suicide, there are amazing artists that we can call in. They are embalmers, they are cosmetic artists, and they use some very high-tech equipment to make sure that the person is okay for a viewing. There are times where the person cannot be viewed. For example, if someone hasn't been found for quite a long time, or they just don't have much left, unfortunately, we will do all we can to make sure the family are okay. But sometimes you just can't have a viewing. When we first get back to base, though, it's really up to the mortician what they want to do. They'll make the decision on what happens next. But there's just so much that goes on.
I think, for me, and I guess for a lot of people, that sort of moment when the deceased arrives and sort of making that assessment as to what to do, depending on, what had happened, the state of the body itself, and I guess, any immediate requests that have been passed along as well. I mean, I'm sure that there'd be people in the heat of the moment emotionally that are making all sorts of directions and requests and things, and especially when people aren't thinking straight as well. And so you've got to manage so many different things at that time. And I think with that all happening, and then the visual and having that, I guess, not confrontation, but it's confronting in the way that, it's this situation's there in front of you, this person is there, and especially in those more extreme circumstances where, as you said, a viewing is just not possible. It's just not realistic to consider that. You
will find, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off,
go.
but funny that you do bring up, it's always a confronting case that people want to see. You'll always have a car accident victim, or you'll always have someone who's tragically jumped off a great height, or that's when the family always want to view, and that's really quite distressing for the family. So sometimes it's very rare you will decline a viewing. It would have to be a very severe case to decline a viewing, because the mortician or the embalmer will do all. But the cosmetics and the chemicals that you can get today, and embalming completely changes the body. It's like it's magic. It's magic fluid. As it flows through the body, you just see this person come back to life. It's quite amazing to watch. So the mortician's hands really are magic. They will always try their very best to allow a viewing, but sometimes you just simply cannot. And I think it's almost like the family need to say goodbye. That's their way of coming to terms with the accident or the the tragedy. That's their way of saying goodbye. They just have to see their loved one, and it is confronting, but it's also so beautiful to watch something so tragic becomes so beautiful. It's truly amazing to see, and if we can do that for you, we will do all we can to make sure that that happens. But it can take hours and it can take a day. It is just, you've never seen teamwork like the team at a funeral home. It's so amazing.
Oh, there's so many. I'm just, as you're talking and explaining these different scenarios, I'm having all these visions in my head of just, depicting different scenarios and the state of some of these people that come, that are brought in, that are transferred in, and just some of the work that would be involved, and in some cases where the team, the people who are that have the expertise in doing this work, have to draw a line at some stage as well, because as you said, like some of those scenarios, such as jumping from a great height, or in a car accident, or something that involves a lot of force and impact, the body may not fare terribly well at all, and so there has to be a certain point in time where people need to make a decision. And I mean, I'm fortunate enough that I've never had to have any experiences like that directly with any friends or family. But I think the last sort of, for me personally, and this, I guess this is the thing about people, is that we all have our preferences as to what we want to do and what we believe we can handle. And I think my last visuals, or my last memories of people, would be when they're still living rather than deceased, or especially in a more extreme set of circumstances. But then that comes down to the individual and what they want.
Yeah.
In that heightened state of emotion, sometimes people aren't always thinking as clearly as they may like to. And so I know some people that just from a standard open casket funeral, where there hasn't been, I mean, I've seen another grandparent, one of my grandmothers, years and years ago, have an open casket, and I went and I had a look, and it wasn't confronting, because I knew what was going on, but it wasn't. I knew that it wasn't her, in the sense that the way that she was represented, and it wasn't any fault of anybody else. It was just that I was way too hyper aware of what was going on. So and I'm a little bit too rational for my own good. But for me, when I think about my grandmother, one of the memories that I have in my head that comes back is that particular event as well. And so that is in there with everything else. And for me, if I could really choose, I probably wouldn't put that in there as well. I'd probably be just thinking about the times when she was still alive. So when people are in a heightened state of emotion and they're so desperate just to get that last moment with that person, and when that person, I mean, I was very fortunate. My grandmother, she looked fine. She looked fine, but
it's not how you remembered her.
Yeah.
And it's a very, very important role in a viewing, I find. This is me personally. I actually love conducting viewings. I've worked for funeral homes where they will leave you alone in the chapel or the funeral home viewing room or wherever it's taking place, and say, okay, it's your time now. I like to be present for a moment, if I had the opportunity to do so, and just explain to the family that this is your loved one, but you do need to describe to them that it's what happens after death, but it's the way you deliver the message. So you just explain, look, Nan's not going to look the same as she did when she's alive, because the body has changed, the skin has changed. She's going to be cold to the touch. She's not going to look exactly the same as you remember her. If you just deliver that message in a way that they understand, they will go into that viewing knowing that, and it won't be such a jolt. It won't be, oh my good, because we don't look the same. We don't look like, I've done funerals where I've seen them and I didn't realize I knew them, because you look so different when you're no longer living. And a lot of people expect that Nan or Mum or your friend or whoever it has passed away, they're going to look the same, and you just want to see them that one last time. You want to hug them, and you think they're going to look the same. And it's our job, I believe, just to educate people a little bit more. And it's the more we fear, the more scared we're going to be. So if we can just break that down a little bit and just and have more viewings, have more people coming in, have more education, explain what happens after death, explain what happens to the body, the viewing might become more of a beautiful experience. It won't be so jolting and scary and petrifying because you're aware that your loved one isn't going to look the same, but this is my time to hold their hand and say goodbye. And when you do leave, like yourself, you said that that was your lasting memory of like the viewing. You don't want that. You go in, you say goodbye, you accept it, you're exposed to it, you're grateful for that experience, but you still walk away with the memories of when they're alive, but you still were able to say goodbye, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
so many people go into the viewing without that knowledge, and that is their last memory. They remember their loved one looking different, and then that's their lasting memory, and that breaks my heart because that's not what a viewing is for. A viewing is your time to say goodbye and remember them for when they were alive. That is why we have a viewing. And unfortunately, too many people are so confronted and scared, and they forget the whole message. So that's really why I really, really love writing and why I love talking to people like yourself to try and spread the word that, you know, it's okay. Let's talk about it more. Let's learn about what happens when we die. Let's understand what scientifically happens to the body and how it breaks down when we pass away. So that way we can embrace it. We can walk into these viewings understanding this, say goodbye, and still remember our loved one as they were when they were alive. Does that make sense?
100%. And one thing that and speaking of your writing, because I was having a look on your blog, and I think it's the most recent one that you put up not too long ago, about a week ago, and it was about the young guy who had passed away, and it was a little bit of a, I guess, I mean, probably not the right term, but a bit of a hippie sort of,
Yes.
funeral, but it was very sort of upbeat, very, very bright and light, and you use the words glitter in there as what was being used for the ceremony, and it was just something that was uplifting. And I think, you know, stereotypically, and probably from a lot of movies and things that we've been sort of exposed to, you know, over the years, we've always seen the typical funeral as this somber thing, especially in certain cultures. You wear all black, and it's, you know, it's the amount of crying that you do that dictates and shows everyone how much the person cared to you. And so people want to, you know, sort of really embrace that solemn aspect of what a funeral is. But, you know, a lot of other people out there are using the funeral as an event to celebrate and to really sort of talk about all the great things about that person. For you, what's some of these, like, do you get really sort of left field sort of funerals that you participate in? Some really odd things that people request, and some things that are just completely sort of battle the stereotype.
Yes, and you know, that day I remember the one we're talking about with the gypsy. His mum actually came up and apologized to me. She said, "I'm so sorry, this isn't the way you would normally do it." And I just wanted to hug her and say, "No, this is how I wish it was all the time." She was apologizing for the glitter and the bubbles and the color, and I just wanted to I wish more ceremonies were like that, because it truly is. Obviously not all circumstances. Of course, if someone passes away at their own hands and it's quite tragic, you're not going to bring out the bubble machine. But, you know, if it's someone has lived their life to their fullest and it's their time, of course it's a cause for celebration. But absolutely, we've walked down the chapel aisle to you know, metal music. I've, you know, lowered someone into the grave to Eminem playing. We've had everybody dressed up as Star Wars characters. We've had clowns. We have such amazing services, and to me, it's the music. I really love it when someone puts on their actual favorite music. I mean, I love Tears in Heaven, and I love, you know, Wind Beneath My Wings. I love all of those tracks, but I hear them in my sleep. Like, I don't believe the deceased would have chose those songs. That's not who they are. So I welcome ceremonies like that, and let's celebrate the actual person. What was their favorite song? What was their favorite food? What was their favorite color? Wear their favorite color. Let's serve the food that they loved. Let's make it more of a celebration of life. But the requests for those kind of ceremonies are rare. I wish they were more common, definitely. But I think if people started to embrace it a little bit more, we would see more of that. But, you know, funerals are just like most things in life. If it's fallen into a routine, wear black, let's have sad music, let's have a hearse. And it's going to take some time, but I'm just really hoping, you know, we can embrace it a little bit more and make it just a little bit less scary.
Well, I think there's heaps of. I mean, I've got a fascination with a lot of this stuff, and I guess it comes from more of the. It probably, and to be completely honest, it's probably a little bit more of an entertainment sort of aspect. But I mean, I think you posted something not too long ago, and I've read this article as well, or a few different articles about the real sort of restrictions that the Chinese authorities are putting on some of the regional rural weddings where, I mean, sorry, not weddings, funerals where they're actually hiring strippers to dance around in, you know, bikinis and whatever to attract and get bigger turnouts for these funerals. It's like, you know, here's this incentive for the locals to come out and attend this funeral so the person who just is, you know, passed on, deceased, you know, they've got this large turnout, and I just think that's absolutely hilarious, and the government's obviously trying to crack down on that. But it's just such a different concept of an approach that, you know, it's a different cultural thing, but just for people to sort of approach it very differently.
Absolutely. Like in Ghana, I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, forgive me, but they have dancing pallbearers. So the pallbearers will be doing these hip hop moves and bouncing the casket around on their shoulders. You've got some Eastern countries that chant for 4 days straight and eat amazing food, and you know that it's a massive celebration. They'll have their loved one in the home for weeks. That, you know, they have dinner together and they sleep together and they have breakfast together, and it's really just the Western world that's so afraid of it and could not imagine such a thing. So I love all those traditions overseas. I think it's just so amazing how different cultures around the world embrace it and have a little bit of fun with it. But it's not only just fun, it's what they believe. They embrace it. They embrace the fact that death is not the end. They believe there is a lot more. It's just the beginning. So they celebrate that. They celebrate new life rather than the end of it. And I just wish that we did that a little bit more.
I think, and I think you're right. I think there's going to be a change, and I think just naturally as we become more connected globally and we share ideas and we're not so sort of stuck in our own little insular pockets of culture, and we become more blended, that we'll embrace a lot of different things, and I think we'll embrace and interpret death in a different way as we learn how other people have done it, and probably done it a lot better than us. But one of the things sorry, go.
No, I really do. I think maybe we're getting there slowly, because, you know, I don't know if you've, you know, we all have an uncle that says, I don't want all the bells and whistles, just throw me, you know, cremate me and throw it on the bar tab. Like, we all know someone who says that.
Sounds like me.
But yeah, but you'd be so surprised at how often that's happening now.
Yep.
There is a massive chunk of our business, or our funerals, sorry, and not funerals, they're just cremations and a memorial service. And that's happening more and more now, where we will conduct the cremation, and then we'll have a memorial service at a bowls club or a sporting field, and the urn is there with the cremains there, and it's more of a celebration, and that's happening more and more. So I think we might get there eventually, not overnight, but I think we'll slowly get there, where people and I also think in Australia, we don't have many caskets. I know it sounds like I'm going off topic here, but we have coffins. So they're the shape of the person. You know, it's like Dracula's coffin, and that's quite confronting. And I think that's part of the reason why people find funerals so spooky. So if you're having just a memorial service with just the urn and some flowers or balloons or something, I think it's a little less petrifying for people. So I think slowly things are changing.
I think so. I remember. I mean, I didn't get to attend, but a friend of many of ours in Wollongong, who had been around for quite a few years, and actually he's been on the podcast. He was unfortunately cancer caught up with him, and he passed on. And
Sorry.
And for anybody listening, I think it was episode 3, Arnie Ulbrich, and fantastic guy, and he passed on. But he had a great outlook on life, and he even when he was approaching sort of those final moments, he just had such a great outlook on the whole thing, and he embraced it, and he just knew that, you know, this is it, and this is I'm doing it in my own terms, and this is how it's all going to happen. And some great friends of mine got to attend his funeral, and one of the things they did was they actually did shots of tequila off his coffin in his backyard.
Oh, that's amazing!
And because he loved Mexico so much and he loved tequila, and he was a
Oh,
musician, and it was just something that was very close to him. And so that was one of the things that he had asked, when he was talking about these sort of things. And so, the family and friends knew what he wanted, so they were able to fulfill some of this. And it was just I think it just took the edge off for a lot of people, and
yeah.
people were able to
Like,
laugh and just go, "Oh my God, I can't believe we're doing this!" And then realizing that, he would have, this is perfect for him. He would have been laughing so hard that everybody was doing this because it's such
oh,
a ridiculous set of
it's so
circumstances,
personal.
but it's
You're,
great.
it's like he was there with you, and I'm so sorry to hear that. That's heartbreaking, but it's also so beautiful that he had that request, and he wanted you to remember him, and he wanted you to celebrate and remember him and the things that he loved, and that's just so beautiful. I love hearing when someone close to end of life requests things for their own service. I think that's beautiful and very healthy, and I think that they're thinking of the ones they're leaving behind. And I think that's just so beautiful. But I'm so sorry to hear that. That's
Oh
all.
yeah, but I mean, it's. I think the good thing, and I mean, I'm quite, well. It depends on the time of day, but I think I'm quite lucky because I'm quite rational sometimes. So I'm able to separate, the emotion from, I guess, the logic, and so I'm able to sort of, I guess, disconnect sometimes. So it doesn't. I don't know. I,
You'd
I
make a
manage it
great
differently.
funeral director.
Yeah, maybe if this podcasting and music stuff doesn't work out as I envisioned, then maybe I can get into the funeral industry.
Yes.
But it's
But it is a very important it's very important skill to have. Otherwise you would just, yes, you wouldn't make it.
well, I'll keep that in mind. I definitely will. But I think one of the things with, I mean, that was an example, but some of the other examples that you mentioned as well, where people are changing their opinions of how they view death, and I think when that particular scenario, I think everybody that got to go and be a part of that moment definitely probably had a change of perspective of what a funeral should be, and even
Yeah.
thinking about, okay, I wonder what I would want when it's my time, and I think as people start to think a lot more about these things, I think then you start to take the edge off it, and you start to understand that, you know what, it's happening to all of us, and it's all going to
Absolutely.
happen, and we've got to
You
we've got to work it out, and we've got to manage it, and we've got to accept that it's completely normal.
That's the most perfect thing that anyone could say, because that's exactly what I was about to say. And it's going to happen. If death was something that only happened to some people and not all of us, and we were all going to live forever, yeah, okay, maybe discussing death and funerals would be a little morbid. Why would you be so interested in some? But because it is going to happen to all of us, why keep denying it? Why keep hiding from it? You're just going to make it more taboo. You're going to make it more scary. So absolutely, bringing a little bit of love and light to it all, it just takes that edge off to something that is really bloody scary. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, it's if I stop for a moment and think, oh my goodness, that's going to be me. So it could be me tomorrow. I shit myself. Oh my God, that could be me. Or sometimes a car flight, I do get scared. I'm not saying I don't get scared, but it is going to happen. So we really need to work together and try and find a way to make it less frightening.
When I mean, you've spoken about this a couple of times along the way of approaching this job and this field of work with a light approach, and obviously what you do, you take it seriously, and it's
Oh,
you
of
have that
course.
professional edge, and when you come in, then you've got that focus, but you do it in a way where um, there's an element of lightheartedness. There's humor at times. There's things where you're trying to, I guess, really sort of take the edge off. And when you're using the examples of the beauty salon versus the funeral home, and how people
Yeah.
take things seriously, when you're starting out, or even now, you know, did you make mistakes along the way, like really sort of very sort of awkward mistakes, especially when you're handling and being involved with the deceased and transferring and going through these processes? Were there certain things that you've
Mm.
done along the way that you've just, like, at the time just went, oh my God, I can't believe I've done that?
Yes. Oh, still do make my silly blonde moments. Oh, stretchers not collapsing. And that's always going to happen when you have 10 family members at the back of the transfer vehicle watching. Of course, they're going to be there when that happens, because you've got the stretcher turned around the wrong way, because you're trying to, you're at your very most professional, and you're there for the family. This is such an important time in anybody's life, and then the stretcher doesn't collapse, and that is, you just wish that you could melt into your shoes and disappear forever. So that's happened to me. I have accidentally shaved a moustache before, so I had to recreate
Oh
one.
no.
Yeah, I mean, I've put the wrong name on a coffin, but it's very rare, but it's inevitable when you're doing such a heavy job. It's so emotionally taxing. Like, we can make light of it, but at the end of the day, sometimes it just really does take a toll on you, and you're tired, you've been on call all week. It's inevitable you're going to make a few silly mistakes, or you write the wrong birth date on a paperwork, and then that just, it makes so much more paperwork for everyone else. So yeah, there's definitely some little errors that I've made along the way. Put the wrong flowers on a coffin, or lowered them into the grave when the family wanted them back. Just so many things that can happen. You feel awful, because this only happens once. You might get married 3 times, but you're only going to have one funeral, and you only get one shot at it to make it perfect. And when you've got all that pressure on you, plus you want to care for the family and you want to care for the deceased, you have so much going on. Yes, you do make lots of little mistakes.
How on earth do you recharge or step away from, I guess, what can be at times so draining, mentally draining, whether it be emotional or just the fact that you've just been constantly in this hyper state of focus throughout the day of working? What do you do to sort of find that balance, or is it just something that you just don't think about? It's just you just function, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, you already know. It's amazing. That's a massive part of it. It's not even really something I consciously think about. When I leave work, I feel very satisfied, and I feel very honoured and privileged to have done what I just did. But to recharge, I guess, I do write a lot, as you've seen, but spending time with my niece and my family, and just, going out for lunch and doing normal things, going for a walk, just doing really mundane, boring, going to I get pleasure from going grocery shopping, because it's just so normal. It's just, I like to just do normal things, because at work there's nothing we do that isn't everyday for most people. So just, getting back into normal society and being around people who aren't in the industry is a great way to recharge. And, it's not always about death in the funeral industry. So it's really important to have another life outside of the funeral home. I think if you lived and breathed it 24/7, which is really hard not to sometimes when you're on call for 2 weeks straight, but it's really important to spend time with friends and family, go see a movie, go out for dinner, just do some things that, are healthy for you.
Well, you said one of those things was writing, and we've touched on it a little bit already, but you've got this blog. You've put yourself out there. You put your name against it. You've had a little bit of media attention along the way as well. And I'll get you to explain a little bit, as we dig in a little bit further. But I believe you're in the process of writing a book as well. And where did this moment come along where you thought, I need to publicly put this out there? Because and what sort of, did you have any resistance? Because I think anybody that works for an employer is always a little bit conscious about, oh geez, should I talk about my job in public? Because you're always worried about sort of how you're representing your employer. And especially for you, it's even worse, because you're working in an industry that has so much stigma attached to it as well. So where did it come from, and what sort of, did you have any challenges sort of getting this out there?
Absolutely. Well, I never actually aimed to do any of that. My blog I wrote it for a year anonymously under a pen name. I said it in a completely different city. Nobody knew it was me. And to me, it was just an outlet at the end of the day. The things I saw and did, there was no way I could keep that to myself. I needed to teach people. I just wanted to write about it, because I love writing. It's one of my greatest passions. So it was just my way at the end of the day to debrief. So I did that for a year anonymously, and I did write a book, but I didn't really plan to publish it. It was more just my hobby, getting back to, just doing things that, were good for me after work. And I unexpectedly scored an agent, which was very unexpected because somebody read some of my work and submitted it to an agent on behalf of me. So it really kind of happened without my knowledge. It was all happening. And my agent suggested that I do make the book a memoir and so-called out myself. And I was really afraid because I did know that I was risking my career and I was risking a lot of things, but I also know only about 4% of authors are blessed enough to get published. So I was thinking, oh no, what do I do here? Do I do I achieve my dream of becoming an author, or do I keep it? I couldn't sleep for many, many weeks over it. So once I decided to publish the book, that is when I went through and added my name to the blog at request of my agent. She asked me to have an online presence, which I'm really bad at because I'm a bit of an introvert, really. So I had to kind of learn how to use Facebook and Instagram. So it wasn't something that I set out to do. It kind of just happened. And yeah, I couldn't sleep for a really long time trying to decide whether it was the right thing to do. And it's a very sensitive subject, so I know that I will always get some sort of negative feedback, but I feel like I've helped a lot of people. And if I can help just one person, well, then my job's done.
Well, actually, sorry, I'm all over the place because I'm thinking of so many different things to ask you.
But so am I.
But one of the things was, what was that did you have a conversation with your employer at the time and say, oh, hey, by the way, I've kind of been writing on the side and I've been approached and, I've never mentioned this before, but I've potentially got a book coming out. Is this okay? Did you have to have any of those types of conversations, or even just with your colleagues, your peers, to sort of go, oh, hey, I've been doing this?
Yeah. It used to make me chuckle inside because funeral directors would always say, I could write a book, or someone needs to write a book about this place. So there was a part of me that had a feeling that maybe they wouldn't mind because they were always going on about it. Someone please write a book about this. So there was a part of me that felt like I was doing what they all wanted to do anyway. But out of respect, when I did get the publishing deal, I did resign from the actual funeral home that I was working for at the time because there was a lot of meetings I had to do in Sydney, and I decided to write full time. But like I mentioned before, I couldn't stay away from the funeral home. I think it was 6 months or something, and I went straight back into it. And my current employment, my employers, they know, and they're okay with it at the moment, I think. So we'll just cross that bridge when it comes to it. But all I know is no matter what happens, I'll always wanting to help people in their time of need and grieving. So I don't know what's in store when the book comes out, to be honest. I don't know what's going to happen, but at the moment my employers know, and we'll just see what happens.
Well, I mean, it's probably the best approach to take because you could miss out on an opportunity of having a book published where, the things that you've been talking about, mean something to you. And I think just from what you've been saying, the purpose of getting something out there for people is to, dispel some of the myths, and to provide people with something that they can something tangible that they can grab onto and learn and be educated about something. And probably just from the way that you present yourself on your blog and the way that you write, there's an element of humor to it as well. There's a nice light approach to it as well. And so I think that would have a great positive impact on people. So I think, in the end, and in the grand scheme of things, you could sort of juggle or, be at the mercy of a individual employer and just follow the suit of whatever that business's policies are, or you could take a step out and see what you can make of it. And then I just think that it all comes down to intention and what you put out there. And I think, just from the little bit of time that I've known you, and we've been talking a little bit and just reading up online, I think your intention's 100% in the right spot. And so I think that, whether it be your current employer or a future employer or anything like that, I don't think, well, just from the outside anyway, it just appears I don't think you'd be held in some negative position because of what you're doing in the public domain. I think it's just something a very positive thing.
Thank you, and that's so lovely of you to say. Thank you for your kind words. And I do ensure the deceased and their families are so important to me as if they're my own family. And I have ensured and always will ensure in all of my craft and my art and writing, I would never, ever put anything down in word that I knew would offend somebody or upset anybody, because as much as I do, have a bit of a joke sometimes or try and add a little bit of glitter and colour to the industry, I take it so very seriously, and I respect each and every single person that I care for. It's just my way of dealing with death also. And a lot of funeral directors do that. Otherwise, we would go mad. So writing the book, like I said, was really just to get it off my chest. And if I can get just a handful of people to read it and be not so scared of it, I'm really grateful for that. And I find that an honor and a privilege. And anybody that I do offend or upset, I would do all I can to ensure that, that isn't my intention. It never would be my intention.
Is there any information about the book as of yet, or is it still sort of behind the scenes and
It's
something
all
that's
still
pending?
behind the scenes, but basically the theme really is like, as you know, like it's called Heels and Hearses. Life is a giant yin yang, and I go on about that a little bit, but mainly that's the theme of the book. There's always the bad, the good. There's tacos and there's good and there's bad, and that's basically the theme of the book.
And
Where there's death, there is life.
Well, that's a great way of putting it. Definitely. Is there any timeline of when it's due out, or is it sort of still in early stages?
Yeah, it's still in editorial, but it is early next year.
Early next
but
year.
I'll let you know.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
I don't
I'm
even
quite
know
keen.
yet, but the traditional publishing route takes some time, but I know it's going to be worth it. I have a great team. They're such beautiful people, and they're doing the best job, and I'm so privileged. It's been such a blessing.
Well, I mean, I could probably talk to you for several hours because there's so many questions that I have, and I think maybe what we should do is, when your book does come out, and I reckon you'll probably get a little bit of attention when that comes out, for good and bad, but I think more so good than anything else. But
Yes.
we should do a round two and catch up, and I'll file through the rest of the million questions that I've got here, and we can talk about the book a little bit more as well when you've got a bit more clarity and that's out there and people can purchase it and read it as well. But
Thank you so much. Thank you for reaching out. It's been such an honor to speak to you, and I love your podcast, and I love your music. I love everything that you're doing. So, and you're also doing a great thing, reaching people about these amazing artists, and I think it's fantastic what you're doing. So it's been such a great privilege to be a part of it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and what an eventful Saturday afternoon. Thanks, everyone. Really hope you enjoyed that chat with Emma. If you want to reach out to her and learn a little bit more, you can go to heelsandhearses.com, or you can search for Heels and Hearses on Facebook as well. And you know the drill. As always, you can go to the show notes over at andysocial.net. I'll have links, photos, everything that we discuss will be there. And I will update those show notes and update you all in 2019 when Emma's book comes out. And I think we'll do a round two because I only just scraped the surface. There were so many things that I wanted to ask her and we just ran out of time. And I think we'll have additional things to talk about when the book comes out as well. So stay tuned. A round two will happen further on down the track, but andysocial.net is the best place to go. Nice and centralized. Make your life easy. Now, before we wrap it up, 2 shows for 2018. September 22nd at Max Watts in Melbourne. That's a Saturday night. We're headlining the Metal United Down Under Festival with a whole range of awesome Australian bands there. And the other show is in Sydney, Saturday, November 3rd at the Bullface Stag. We are headlining day 2 of the Steel Assassins Festival there. You can get tickets for both of those shows over at lord.net.au, or you can go to andysocial.net, click on the shows tab for both of those websites, or you can go to Moshtix that are selling tickets for both those shows, and I think Oztix are also selling some additional tickets for the Melbourne show as well. Plenty of ways to get tickets, so if you get lost, let me know. But if there's an opportunity for you to buy tickets up front, it helps big time for the promoters, for the bands, for the venues. It legitimizes, it just gives upfront guarantees, it just helps things move along. It just the support of doing so instead of buying tickets at the door, it just means a hell of a lot and just helps. It has a massive impact on the local music scene. So whenever you've got an opportunity to buy in advance, please do so. And it just saves you having to fork out more well, fork out cash on the night. You can allocate that to beers. Great idea. Or merchandise, of course. So anyway, enough of that. Before we wrap it up, as always, if you want to support the podcast, you can do so in a whole range of different ways. Social media love, messages of encouragement, guest recommendations, buying merch, antisocial merch or Lord merch, recommending this podcast to friends. You know the drill. Like it all goes a long way, small or big. It really, really helps me. So thank you so much for the ongoing support. It means a hell of a lot. I'm going to stop waffling. Until next week, folks, take care. Ta-ta.